Hi there, thank you for staying with us on Prime Morning. And you know what we bring you at around this time. Prime, of course, we bring you beyond the headlines, and we have our guest seated and ready to actually engage us. Some of the issues we're going to be considering this morning, the 306 murders that we've had so far, and the state of security in the country, so to speak. We have Talay Ahmed, that journalist as well, who has been slain. We're also going to be looking at flooding in the northern regions, not just the northern region, but the 5 northern regions, the spillage of the Bagri Dam. We shall engage on the NDC's, should I call it a love-hate relationship, love spat with the Electoral Commission, and also focus on Agenda 111, those 111 hospital facilities that are supposed to be put up. At what cost? We get into that with Alex Segbefia, who is our guest this morning, former health minister and also in charge of the international relations desk of the NDC. Mr. Segbefia, thank you for connecting.
Thank you very much. Good morning to you and good morning to your viewers.
Right. So right off the top, we're going to start with health-related matters, and you've been very prominent, especially in recent times, talking about Agenda 111 and how it's not a novelty. Let's start from there. Why is Agenda 111 not a novelty?
Well, for a start, it has always been a policy within the NDC from time immemorial to have one district, one hospital. It has also been a policy which the MPP themselves aspired to, and even was in their 2016 manifesto. So, and then for the NDC, the issue of one regional hospital per region is not new, and the psychiatric hospitals was always on the table with regard to having psychiatric hospitals in the Ashanti region for the Middle Belt and in Tamale for the Northern Belt. What is novel is the fact that it's all been put together and told that we are going to do it in 18 months, the significant part being 18 months. And that is novel. But like with most things, we don't believe, or I don't believe that it's doable in the time that has been given for it, namely 18 months. For a start, I think it's a sleight of hand to try and separate the 88 hospitals and subsume them into the 111. The 88 hospital program was a separate promise. Was it done as an election gimmick? In April of 2020, I'll build 88 hospitals in 12 months. Fast forward, after 16 months, I'm now going to build 111 hospitals, and no mention of the fact that I wasn't able to do the 88 hospitals in 1 month, and therefore I'm putting it now under 111. For me, the first thing is that there has been a failure, in fact, resounding failure, because not even one hospital was built of the 88 in 16 months, let alone 1 year. We now start a new project which subsumes the 88 and goes into 111. And yet we are not being told where the money to do this is actually really going to come from. We are told that it's going to be a GOG project. From experience, and I use the Sofo line interchange as a good experience. We had roads in this country where we took loans for, but for the Sofo line, because of the importance, we said in the time and not getting enough funding, it was done under the government of Ghana project. When we took over from the MPP government, President Kufuor had put this on the government of Ghana. It took us how many years to finish that project because the strain and the pressure on the government of Ghana budget is such that they give you money as and when it can become available. We are under so much strain at the moment because of COVID, because of the fact that we have debt relief, which we have to pay for.
All right.
And so at this moment in point when business is struggling and our debt to GDP ratio is so high, you cannot be expecting that you're going to raise 1.7 billion for hospitals because you've only had 100 million so far. And the total project will cost us in the region of 1.8, and that is being generous because the regional hospitals and the psychiatric hospitals are not going to be the 70 million per facility. That has
16.88 million, actually, to be specific. I can even make that by the 111.
Well, I can even go by the 16. I give them credit for, or I can give them the benefits of the 0.88. But even when you do the maths, it doesn't add up. It also begs the question, what type of hospital? Because in Shama recently, last year, for the same district type hospital, we were told we had to give a loan of 32 million. 32 million euro, which works out at $40 million approximately.
Is it not more about prudent spending, more efficiency in delivering same hospital facilities and equipment at better prices?
From 17 or 16.88 to 40 million.
So the point.
So what type of hospital are you building, and what is going into it?
Are you saying then that the quality of these hospitals are already in doubt?
It's either that Shama is overpriced or the quality of these hospitals are suspect. One of the two. I'm not there, I can't tell you, but somebody should explain it. It's one of the two. Because if you're building a district hospital at $40 million approximately, and you are now building hospitals at 16.88, the question is, why that gap? Is it the fact that they have different facilities, more beds? Is more beds going to give you a difference of how much million? From 40 million, what's it called, 17 odd million, that is 3, plus another 23 million difference. What is the difference between the two hospitals? It's important that they come out and explain it, because it sounds a bit suspect. But be that as it may, that is, for me, periphery to the fact that, fine, everybody is in favor of the hospitals being built, because it's not new and we love it. If we can get those hospitals, we'll be the first to stand up and clap for President Nana Addo. We just don't believe it from past records. It doesn't seem feasible. If they had the money available, clearly, like they have the 100 million available from the infrastructure fund, which, by the way, was set up by John Mahama, and they've been able to get it. Fine. So if they have that, and they were able to tell us this 1.7 is coming from elsewhere, it would have made sense. And that is where, for me, is the bugbear.
Okay.
Not to go into even the difficulties with construction. Right.
We'll get into finer details when it comes to costing, because you've even been talking about 100 million being, expended on some 7 hospitals and not knowing where the rest of the funding is going to be coming from. But your disbelief with regard to the figures, my mind just went to the University of Ghana Medical Center, for example. Over $200 million in there. I think one of the phases alone, I think the last phase, or is it the first one, cost about 50 million. So that may be a different, facility in terms of what it does. But are you looking at some of these things and thinking that it is not feasible? This is going to be at the district level. This is going to be at the regional level. And there are certain dynamics that would go into those.
We've been building district hospitals in this country for years. For years. This timetable for 111, based on the time frame we've used, when we've had the money actually taking loans to build, is unrealistic, let alone when we don't actually know where the money from. It's unrealistic. And the University of Ghana Medical Center, there's no comparison in terms of what is there and what we are going to build.
That is why I said that they may be different facilities.
Completely different facility in terms of, and the costing for that, even at the time, was being challenged by the MPP as being too high. So they now come up with a hospital that is going to be 17 million. But the same government agreed a $40 million facility in Shama. That was okay. Now they have a system where they say they're going to do hospitals for 70 million. I'm concerned. Talking about design, when the hospital in Dodowa was built, the WHO Africa rep came to Ghana when it was opened, and his exact words were that this should be a model for all district hospitals in Africa, not Ghana, in Africa. So you would like to think that in our Ministry of Health, we have some designs for district hospitals that are of a top notch. Why do we have to pay 6 million for further designs? I mean, and maybe somebody will say, look, it's for 188 hospitals or 103 hospitals, so you need a totally different kind of cost effectiveness. Come and tell us. Because for me, if you already have a state-of-the-art design, which is being commended by at the WHO level, don't tinker with it too much. If it's not broke, don't fix it.
But there's a change in regime, and we know what to expect from your end and from the other end as well.
So if there's a change in regime and something is good, you must touch it by all means? No, that is what's part of our problem.
We don't have the right policies in place for continuity, because if such comments are passed, and I do remember when that was said about the Dodua facility, but of course it's not being replicated. So,
but why?
Is it not? That's why I'm asking you. Is it not then a problem in the system where maybe some policy guidelines must be extant, even at the Ministry of Health and moving beyond, so that what is good, which doesn't need fixing, can be duplicated or replicated, so that we can have similar facilities across the country? Are we in need of that?
We definitely need to understand that continuity is a good thing and must be celebrated when it is done. But like you said, because of the partisan politics we practice, everything somebody else does is not good and shouldn't be. And the person who actually made a big effort to move away from that was President Mills, followed by President Mahama. You remember when we had the A41 highway from the motorway right up to almost Mahati Hill. It was started under President Kufuor. When President Mills came and was ready for commissioning, he invited President Kufuor. Come, this was your idea. We celebrate you for it. We done, under President Kufuor, we invited him. He was celebrated. Why haven't we commissioned the airport Terminal 3 up to now? Why did we recommission Ridge Hospital? It's a different mindset for a different set of people. Don't paint all of us with the same brush. Okay,
I'll not go too far into that, but I want you to very quickly address this one. You spoke about subsuming the 88 under the 111.
Yes.
I'll just go back to the common saying, better late than never. Yes, 16 months and nothing was done as far as the 88 were concerned. Now they've subsumed them under the 111 and they say, give us some 18 months and we're going to execute. What difference does it make? Is it not still of benefit to the country?
I think it's disingenuous. The first thing, why? Why say you're going to build hospitals in a year, 6 months to an election? It's definitely an election gimmick. You do it, and when we ask you, so COVID was at its height when you made the promise. That's why you made the promise, we understood. You had got everything in place. So that's totally disingenuous, and it's given all politicians, I'm not saying that we haven't done it in the past, but it's given us politicians a bad name. We have to stop this kind of behavior. It is clear to me, but look, let's wait for the 18 months. There must be some magic somewhere that I don't know about, and I'll be the first to hold up my hands in 18 months. The next question that I hear people say, oh, but if we build 20, it's fine. Really? The promise is 111 hospitals. Don't bring us, we were punished. How many schools did we say we were going to build? We built 60 something out of the 200 or something. People said it's not good enough. Now people are saying, oh, if you build 20 out of the 111, oh, you've done. After promising us 88 you couldn't build, you come and build 20, and all of a sudden we are supposed to clap for you. We'll be happy that the 20 are there. Definitely, it's good. But why did you say 111 when you know you can't do it? That type of deceit, in my view, and it's not yet deceit because the 18 months is not up. But if we get there and we haven't got the 111, then it's been unfair to Ghanaians.
Would it be a double deceit then?
Of course, because there are two separate promises. As far as I'm concerned, the first one is already clearly a deceit. I mean, we never got any of. You see, it's different if there were 5 on the ground or some. There is none. Right. Why come out and make such? And if you should go and listen to the broadcast, it was quite specific, you know, as to the feasibility have been done and all blah blah. And it was a very specific promise of 88 hospitals in a specific time frame.
Right.
What happened?
Okay.
And all he had to do was come back. He had, that was, I think, COVID broadcast 8. We're now 20 something. He could have come back a lot earlier and said, oh, look, we've looked at this thing. It's not going to be feasible. If it is feasible, we wouldn't be able to do it at this stage because there's a bigger picture. We are going for the bigger picture. Then you've been honest, but none of that. And I'm saying that it's not good and it was disingenuous. It was an election gimmick.
Why does there seem to be a problem with bankrolling our own projects? And I'm talking about GOG, Government of Ghana projects, because it appears each time we need funding, whether it's our roads, it's our hospitals, even our electoral system before we can get something rolling. And you've just expressed that with your lack of confidence in this agenda 111. Why is that so? And I pose that question specifically from here. Look at Pualugu, for example, the dam. And we'll get to that later when we talk about flooding in the northern belt of the country. About $938 million, thereabouts, the promise. So just about $1 billion required. We said it was going to be solely government funded. Here we are today. The Bagre Dam is being spilled, and we are back to square one. Then we have the situation, at least $100 million put forth to be committed into those 7 facilities. My point being that it appears most of the time when something is going to be funded purely from the government of Ghana, there are so many hiccups, bottlenecks. Why is that? You've been there, done that. Tell us.
Well, I think first and foremost, it's important to understand that the pressure on government funding is multifaceted. And you have to look at projects that the government decides to do. And when the government makes those decisions, it must be aware of its total funding. It also makes this decision based on projections of what they expect to get in terms of revenue. Now, in this current President Akufo-Addo's government, when we left office, we had 2 oil wells which were going to give us extra revenue, which was money that we had not been expecting but was coming on board. Based on that, we had a plan with regard to how we were going to continue with, for example, getting us to the point where you would have free SHS moving. President Addo came and decided, this is my flagship project, I'm doing it. And he don't do that with a loan, you have to do that with GOG funding. Yeah. It is a huge funding issue. And if they had implemented it, I've always said, in a different way, continued where President Mahama left off. In other words, concentrate on building the infrastructure, concentrate on building the educating more teachers, and put them in place in the first 2 years. And then in the 3rd year or the 4th year, you go for the whole bang of implementing the free SHS. That way, you would have the teachers and the infrastructure, and you would have been able to fund it. All that money that was pumped in the beginning, you would have been able to fund it and pick up the money from the oil revenue that came to assist you to do that. But when you go in from the beginning, you now have a traffic light system, as they call it, which has not yet been fixed. You don't have the right number of teachers, and you're always catching yourself. But the expenditure on it is already there. It's in place. You still have to spend the money. Look how much has been spent on past questions. Past questions was something that if you were a student, you were really interested, you go and find a way to purchase it yourself to help you. That's what it was about. But you hope that you're being taught well enough in the school for you to be able to pass the exam. Anyway, not to study.
Well, during our time, yes, many years ago, that's what we did. It was left to us. But,
exactly.
But does that necessarily make problematic the fact that maybe a government says, we're going to make it easier for you so that you can actually pass your exams? Does that make that wrong? We have free SHS, for example, where government has decided, you know what, I'm going to take part of the responsibility that you would have had to foot when it comes to your financial equivalent or payment and shoulder it for you. It's practically the same thing.
Every idea is beautiful. Do you have the money to do it? At what point did the past questions get to the students? At the time they were writing the exams, some students didn't even have the past questions. What kind of implementation is that? And in any event, you've given them free senior high school. Is it not one of those things rather that you just say, look, I've done all this for you, you're not paying fees. The way you used to operate like that for a while, at least till I can find the funding and do. Look, food is not being paid for. The school feeding program is on its knees. Teachers are screaming for money, that they are not being paid well, etc. There's other pressures in the education system, which, for me, beautiful as the idea of free senior high school is, and by the way, it was started by Nkrumah, and we messed it up, and now we are coming back to it. And by the way, it is in our manifesto. But once again, the novelty of it is, Nana Addo said, I'm doing it all at the same time. Now, that's the novelty. Fine. When you put all that together, why add an extra burden when all you needed to do was give yourself 2 years? Because the problem with it is that there's not enough infrastructure. There's not enough teachers. You haven't costed it and funded it properly. That's the problem. Why didn't you just buy yourself time? You had 4 years. allow yourself to start in the third year, you would still have achieved it. But allow the money to come in before you spend it. You started spending the money even before the oil wells were drilling oil out, technically, in terms of how it was implemented. So I think that it has a lot to do with planning and knowing where your money is going to in terms of the question you asked. If we had planned properly, waited for the money to come before we started expending it, with all these flagship projects, you had one village, one dam, one district, one factory, all these promises that had been made at election time, and you still had the same pot of money having to do it, you did your flagship project, which was free HSS. Not very well, but you did it. So, as they say in Tree, we say in Ewe Gojidi or Aboteri, because patience. Take your time and do it so that we all don't suffer.
Okay, let's get to the focal point, which is Government of Ghana financing projects. So, what is the problem here? Is it a lack of prudent management?
Yes, it's planning. It's planning. It is planning. It is lack of planning that will get someone to say, I'll build 88 hospitals in 1 year. And 16 months down the line, he comes and he tells us that I'm going to build you 111, and he hasn't told us where the money is coming from. That is bad planning.
Okay, bad planning. My very final bit on that very point, and I hope you can make it very brief. You also feel that this is going to lead to excessive borrowing. Why do you feel that, and what do you feel the impact is going to be as far as
when you say it's going to lead? We already have excessive borrowing, but the hospitals, he says, is not. They said there's going to be GOG,
so there's even more borrowing.
What they haven't said they're going to borrow. They say it's from GOG, so there's no borrowing at the moment with regard to these hospitals. There's no borrowing. What they are looking to borrow for is the 1 billion for the ACA deal that they've been talking about and other stuff. But where we are, we constantly keep hearing from the World Bank and the IMF that their projections in terms of borrowing are not good. And you shouldn't be doing this type of things in a COVID season where we are in the third wave. And every wave that comes has an impact on our economy and we've had the global economy. So a little bit more prudent economics is required.
Let's take a quick look now. Let's segue from health-related matters to easy reform-related matters. And you've been at the forefront of speaking about those as well. Your party recently came out with some 34 proposals, and I've listened to you. You've spoken about the fact that you sourced information from CSOs, from the Peace Council, from basically all facets of society, and you put these together. I've heard Asa Asante, political science lecturer at the University of Ghana, say that, well, the Electoral Commission should listen to you, not just because you are one of the parties in the mix when it comes to our body politic, but that some of the things that you are saying, well, we at some point we'll have to address them anyway. But my question to you, why did the NDC shy away from IPAC, basically wean yourselves of IPAC, and now you come back to say, we want to push these reforms when you've basically stepped out of the party?
Well, I don't see the difficulty with people not understanding why we shied away from IPAC. Basically, if you are in a marriage, which is what we are with the EC, and you are in a violent relationship where the husband is or the wife is always beating the other partner, and you leave the house and people are saying, oh, go back into the house, without any assurances that you're not going to be beaten again, would that be fair? You just wouldn't, you hear them, but you are the one feeling the pain. You just wouldn't go back into the marriage that easily. You need some assurances. And I use that as an analogy very basically, simply because the whole of the 4-year period, or say 2-year leading up to the election, how many things didn't the opposition put forward at IPAC, where IPAC was a consensus building body, was now transformed into a voting organization, where political parties will now vote. And all of a sudden, political parties, some of whose names I have never heard or seen before, were now at the table again, voting on issues which will not affect them in any way because they didn't even go into the election. That is the problem with IPAC. IPAC is supposed to be a consensus building body, not necessarily a voting. In the past, when IPAC used to meet, they would debate issues to the point of consensus. Afarajan in his time, if there was no consensus, he would simply say, put it on the back burner, we'll come back to it. This is how, and most of the time, he always tended to defer to the opposition. Why? Because the government had the power and you didn't want to see that they were being bullied. Because of the history of the way in which IPAC was created. IPAC was created because of the boycott of the MPP
in the parliamentary election.
So if Parliament was going to be left as the body to deal with the recommendations for an election, it gave an unfair advantage to the government in power at the time. IPAC was created as a body to allow the MPP to come onto the table. And they brought in a whole raft of reforms, which from opaque ballot boxes to transparent, from black and no photo ID cards to photo ID cards, from photo ID cards to black and whites to color.
Biometric.
Biometric was also, all these reforms were by the MPP in opposition because there was always a deferment and a push by the Electoral Commissioner to the government in power at the time to say, look, listen, these are really, let's listen to the ideas. We want to move up. Don't look at it on a partisan basis. Is it good? What they're asking for, is it worthwhile? And if it is, let's go, because then it gives, they cannot complain tomorrow if they lose and if you win.
So, Mr. Sigbetia, pardon my interjection, but just to clarify, right from the early 90s when IPAC was formed, on 94. The back of what you said, from 92, the parliamentary boycott to 94, and then subsequently from 95, the work of IPAC till today.
Yes.
You've always had some of these parties, and I know there's been talk about the fact that whether it's the NDC in power or the MPP in power, there always are some, so to speak, sponsored parties.
We are not against political parties.
Let me just make this point. That toe the line of the party in power.
Yes.
It's never been different. It's always been like this. So why the complaint about these other parties and all of that? It's always been that way, even when you have been in power.
Because we never voted. It was consensus. This is the point. It was never a voting house. Whatever the idea was, it was put on the table, it was debated and discussed dispassionately. Any change that came was by consensus. That was how it was built. So notwithstanding how people were shouting in the street and MPP and NDC, when they got to the table, they acted well. They were not easy deliberations, but consensus was built. None of these issues that you're talking about, changes, came about by voting. No. But once you make it a voting house, then you now have to start looking at the rules of engagement. Because it means that no matter how much I shout, you have your way. When your way, I mean, now, there's another aspect to this which I think is very important. Don't think about MPP, NDC, just look at the recommendations and make your decision. Are the points that are being raised useful or not? Are they good points? And if they are, stop looking at who brought them. This is the EU report. 18 recommendations. 28 of them.
The NDC source some of the recommendations?
Some of these recommendations are not even different from ours.
But did you source from the EU's recommendations?
No, we read their recommendations. But the recommendations we have put forward are slightly different in some material, in terms of, but some are very similar.
Okay.
So it's not new. The Commission for CRC, Constitutional Review Commission, came up with recommendations regarding the EC, which we have put in our this thing. So it's not new. The Electoral Commission Reform Committee, which was set up, also came out with recommendations way back in 2015. Some of them are in this document. So let's not look at it as an NDC document. It's a Ghana document. Jean Mensah is the best person to implement this because she was both on the Constitutional Review Commission and the Electoral Commission Review. So she knows exactly what these changes are about. So we feel that she being in the chair is a good time for these reforms to take place. And they are in two categories. Yes, there are some which can't deal with, which are not directly just the EC, but there are some which are the EC, like the regional collation centers, which on paper is a good idea, but in reality it has never worked in the way that it has been anticipated to work. It's a big problem.
Okay, so as we gear up to wrap up, I would have you touch on a few of the other issues. But before we do that, I want us to just neatly wrap up on this electoral reform bill. I mean, from providing for prior parliamentary approval for the appointment of EC members to the repeal of the requirement for the consent of the AG to be given before the prosecution of electoral offences. It's a plethora of reforms that you've proposed.
Yes.
Why didn't you do this when you were in power?
Because
why didn't you implement these? You had every opportunity to do that.
No, it was a time thing. A lot of the electoral reforms were in the Referendum Reform Committee recommendations in 2015. If you remember right, the CRC recommendations were also there, but the matter was taken to court and was in court for 15 months as to whether or not a president had the right to set up a committee of this nature. The Supreme Court, by a decision of 5-2, ruled that it should be done and can be done. And so His Excellency President Nana Addo's view that he doesn't think so is going against the Supreme Court decision because it's been decided on as law. We then lost another period when we went to court. Chairman Sabosu, who was the minority leader at the time, said that, there were issues with regard to what the Speaker should lay, whether before them first or it should just go to the Council of State, etc. It ate into the time. By the time those matters were resolved, we were already in the election cycle. And therefore, to try and do changes at that point was going to be difficult. So it was left on the back burner for us to finish the election in the hope that when we win, Charlotte Osei was going to implement them all. Okay. Fast forward, we lose an election. And before Charlotte Osei can get her feet under the table, she's also removed.
Okay, so it was a time thing.
So it was a time thing. It has nothing to do with us not being in power, and not doing it. The Constitutional Review Commission finished its work in 2012, 2013, 2012, and it went to court for 15 months by a Asari number 2 versus the Attorney General. And that took 15 months before a decision was made. So it's not like the time, and then we had set up a Constitutional Implementation Review Commission.
Okay, so that point is very clearly made.
Yes.
The EC has given you a bottom line. Go to IPAC. Are you going to go back to IPAC?
Don't know. I mean, IPAC there are many people talking to us and speaking. We are not against being at IPAC. We think that IPAC was a creation during our tenure as government by the EC in 1994. We knew what we set it up for. It has served its purpose. IPAC should be listened to. And one of the recommendations you will realize is that IPAC should be given a statutory basis.
Right.
Therefore, IPAC itself is an issue that has to be discussed. And perhaps the forum to discuss is not at the forum which we are actually challenging.
So until those things are done, you are not touching IPAC?
I'm not saying that, no. I'm saying that there's dialogue. As somebody said, we have to talk, we have to understand ourselves and reach. But by the way, where is IPAC's secretariat? Where's their office? If you say we should send it to IPAC, who are we sending it to? The EC controls IPAC. If you send it, and if you woke up and decided that, look, in the dream I had last night, I had a fantastic idea for electoral reform, and you wrote it down.
Where do you send it to?
Interesting question.
Finally, I just want us to wrap on this point in less than 2 minutes, maybe in a minute and a half.
Okay.
We've also had all of these murders, of course, 306 of them between January and just about June. The current or the acting IGP, Dr. Dampare, has his hands full. What do you feel about the state of security in the country on the back of that? We have the recent one of the slaying of Mr. Tali Ahmed, the journalist, and your party's flag bearer in the 2020 elections, John Dramani Mahama, former president, has been speaking about that and the despicable nature of what happened. And we also have Dr. Dampare on the other end and his work. I want you to spell out for us what you see as far as the state of security is concerned in respect of these murders, and how well you feel the acting IGP has fared in dealing with them. That's the final point.
First and foremost, let me commend the police for the arrests that were made with the shooting of some armed robbers yesterday. We must commend them on it. But that in itself begs the question which answers your point. The police have to be proactive and not reactionary. Police work is normally intelligence-driven. How did they find these people all of a sudden and attack them in just this space of time because a foreign journalist was attacked? Are they telling us that if you're a Ghanaian and you are being shot on the road, it's fine, but the moment a foreign journalist is attacked, then all of a sudden they have been able to identify the armed robbers that are involved in this, or some of them, and they are taken out? That, for me, is a reactionary position as opposed to proactive. And that is where, for me, the police work must change as a former prosecutor in my life. Intelligence is everything that the police work with. They sometimes know who these people are. They must start putting out surveillance, watching people. They can actually even get them in the act if they are, their intelligence is good. Because they knew where to find this in less than 24 hours. They've been able to identify people and deal with them. So that, for me, is key to solving these problems. And the new IGP has his hands full in ensuring. And then they have to do house cleaning as well. Because there's also the belief that some of these things involve police officers and security agencies, and that is a problem. But I thank you very much. I know it's time to wrap up, so I'll come another day, we talk some more.
Well, very, very important points that you have made, and it's been great discoursing with you, Mr. Alex Sigbefia, former health minister and also head of the International Relations Desk with the NDC. This has been Beyond the Headlines. And coming up next with Daryl Kwao is Talking Business. Today, they're talking about the impact of COVID-19 and on changing work attitude. Do stay for that next conversation.